Hey, fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. Today I'm here with Swupnil Sahai, the CEO and co-founder of Swingvision, a software I'm pretty sure you've used. It's a really cool app, tracks everything, and it's backed by Andy Roddick, James Blake. Sure, you've heard of these guys and many more, and it's something I've been using for a long time myself. We're going to talk about the journey. We're going to get into the weeds with the CEO today. But first of all, how are you today?
Hey, Jonas, I'm doing really well. Super excited to be on this podcast, especially because I've been a tennis nerd of my own my whole life. So it feels very appropriate and excited to be here.
Great. So what is your background in tennis? Like, I know this came from Berkeley, like the whole idea, but how did you get into tennis, first of all?
Yeah, I started playing probably like around the time I was 7 years old. My dad played kind of as long as I've been alive. So it was his main sport. He was always watching Roger Federer on TV. And so kind of became a Federer fan through him. The racket kind of alludes to that here. And then I kind of grew up playing with my brother as well, who's 2 years younger than me. So kind of tennis family, I guess you could say. And that's been our main sport. Also play a little bit of basketball here and there, but I think tennis has always been my main sport. And then, as you mentioned, I went to Berkeley. I went more the academia route. I always wanted to play more tennis than I actually got to play, but my parents being kind of immigrants in the US, the big focus was always on education and like, got to go to college. You got to have the safer path, I guess. And so that's the route I went. And I was studying specifically statistics and machine learning, tried to become a professor. So I went to Columbia to get my PhD in statistics, actually. So I was out in New York, played on some clay out there. Unfortunately, it's the U.S. green clay, so it's not real clay, but it's decent. It's the best we can get around here, and that's kind of the route I went, and then ended up working in like autonomous driving. So that's sort of my background, is really more in statistics, machine learning, and now I guess you could say artificial intelligence and doing things with cameras. That's really kind of my background.
It's been quite a journey with Swingvision. I mean, you started in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, and then you had like the pandemic happen straight after that. How did that like affect your journey? Because you've been going on a pretty straightforward and good momentum, but that must have been a big shift in things, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think just even shifting to Swingvision, like I was at Tesla before this, and so it was relatively stable there, and the company was just getting to profitability, so it was sort of a safe thing to do. And ended up kind of taking this sort of a chance, taking a bet here with Swingvision. And things were going pretty well, though, initially in 2019. And then we launched the first version of the app where you could put up your iPhone and record your game and get some stats. And that was released towards the end of 2019, just before the pandemic. And then it was really terrifying. Yeah, when the pandemic started, like initially all the tennis courts closed everywhere. So then we were kind of in panic mode. Nobody was using the app anymore. We actually even did like a short-term pivot at the time. We built these drills that you could do at home by just like putting your phone on the ground and you could hit against the wall and things like that. And so we actually really tried to shift focus very quickly. But then it was like a few months later and then everything opened and then tennis was the only sport that people were playing. So then it was sort of like the opposite effect. And so then that was great. And so we were able to then kind of focus back on the core product, which was like recording yourself on the tennis court. And then from there, just kind of kept iterating on the product and improving, the general accuracy of the tracking and everything.
How has your journey like startup life being? Because startup life is tough. Like you need an entrepreneur is not an easy job to be in, and you need to see some success, and you have to go through a lot of hardships as well. Even if your journey is going pretty well from the start, how has that been for you to be kind of in startup and being an entrepreneur and a founder?
Yeah, it's been tough. I mean, for me personally, like I'm pretty introverted. I've never been a risk taker. Like I just mentioned, always sort of went the safe path, go to college, go to grad school, like work at an established public company. Like that's kind of been sort of my mentality always. So I think switching to like a risk taking position has definitely been a bit of an adjustment. And I've gotten better with that, but obviously it's tough. And even initially, like starting out, we pitched to a bunch of VCs out here in Silicon Valley. We got no investment whatsoever from any VCs in the very first round of funding that we did. Thankfully, we did get Andy Roddick and James Blake, as you mentioned. So they were our first two investors, and we were able to somehow get to them through our network of just people that we knew, like in the tennis community. But if it wasn't for them, like the company probably wouldn't even exist because like no one else wanted to fund it. So it was definitely a struggle then. And then even once we released the product, we tried again to go out for some VC funding, and it was still really hard. There were a couple times where we were just a couple months from running out of money completely as a company. So that's happened a few times. So, there've been some dark and scary times, I would say. But the good thing is, as a product has gotten better, as we have more customers using it, the word of mouth has like spread more. Then I think every subsequent round of funding has gotten easier, at least. And so we finally did raise from venture capital, and like we had a Series A last year that was led by a VC firm. So we're finally like in that world now. But it wasn't that straightforward for us to get there, and it was definitely a bit of a different path, I think, if you compare it to other Silicon Valley startups, at least, where, a lot of them will start out their first round, they raise like $5-6 million. Like we did not do that until last year. So, we didn't do that till like 4 years in. But I think as far as like tennis company goes, yeah, we've I think moved quite quickly, and that's been good to see that we've been able to bring some innovation to the sport, which is exciting.
Yeah, and what's been, you think, the pros and cons of being a tennis company? It's been like, do you think that affected like the backing of the company, that it's like tennis, and tennis is, you can argue that it was rising after the pandemic, but in the US you have a lot of these reports like it's going down, people aren't watching, but then you're seeing tennis do well in other metrics, so it's very tough to say. But do you think that's affected it in some way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think especially those first two rounds of funding, tennis was in the US at least perceived as a very high income, country club sport that only really rich people play. And it's not as serious or as massive a market compared to like basketball or baseball, which are like huge here in the US. And a lot of VCs just also aren't familiar with the tennis market globally and like how big of a sport it is, like in Europe and so many parts of the world. So I think they were kind of wrong on some of those things. But yes, as you mentioned, it was kind of stagnating in the US. But post-pandemic, I guess that's been a bit in our favor. Tennis has become very popular now again in the US. We have some great players, both on the men's and women's side, but especially the women's side, kind of leading the front after Serena and all the other legends that we had in the kind of the 90s and 2000s. So that's been great to see, and that's helping a lot. And then obviously pickleball has been another thing that's also picked up very quickly, and it seems like everybody I know is playing it, even friends who never cared about racket sports before. So I think that's really good to see that we're getting that pipeline of people, and hopefully some of them will kind of move to tennis eventually. But I think all that's kind of helping now. And then I think tennis is in a good spot now in the US. It's growing more. I'd like to see some more men, I guess, on the pro side, kind of getting to the later stages of the slams and all that. I mean, we did have Francis at the semis at the US Open a couple of years ago. But I think, the more of that we can get, then I think it just builds more excitement. And, you have these young players like Ben Shelton who kind of like get non-traditional fans involved in the sport. I think that's really good. So more of that, I think hopefully we'll just continue growing the sport here in the country. But I know it's booming, obviously, in Europe and the rest of the world. So that's great to see.
Yeah, do you offer the app for pickleball as well now, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's something that we added in December. So it's still in the same app, and you can basically select your sport in the app, kind of like Strava, where you can select whether you're going to go for a bike ride or go for a run. So very similar. And it's been picking up well. It's, tennis is still the primary sport of the app, and our logo is still a tennis ball and all that. So that's always going to be the roots of the company. But, we do see that we are able to provide value in these other sports, pickleball and eventually padel as well. So there's lots of, additional opportunities, I think, for us in the future. But this is our first time going to new sport. So it's been a good learning experience.
Yeah. And I guess that must be the way to go as well, to kind of go into other sports that are of similar nature. I mean, tennis and pickleball, they have a bit of a antagonistic relationship at the moment. Like, is that something you notice also from your point of view in Swingvision?
Yeah, we do notice it sometimes. I mean, it's been a tough line to balance. Like, in our social media, for example, like our Instagram page is like our primary social media channel, and so we post a lot of content and rallies from players there all the time. And so now we're trying to mix in some pickleball rallies, and sometimes you do get our followers kind of complaining about that, like, oh, why am I seeing pickleball on my feed? Like, I don't want to see this pickleball stuff. So, you do get some of that, but I think overall, people just kind of have to accept that it is like part of the culture now. It is a sport that, it's there, and your friends are playing it, whether you like it or not. And so I think people have to just kind of get accustomed to it. But I think there was some initial pushback when we like first launched it, But since then, I think it's been good. And I think the biggest concern customers probably had was like, oh shoot, like they're launching in pickleball. That means they're not going to develop anything new for tennis anymore. But that's not true. Like we've been adding lots of new features for tennis. In fact, there have been more new features for tennis than pickleball actually this year already. So, I think like people see that, and I think it's kind of made them a little bit more comfortable with the change. But no, overall, it's been good. Like it's always just a small percentage of people who complain about it. So I think with all things, like some people don't like the change, but I think as long as it doesn't detract from what we're doing for tennis, I think then people are okay with it. So.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have you have a connection also to Strava in terms of a backer like Jason Lee from the CFO from Strava, if I'm not mistaken. Do you get, I'm not sure from him, but from any of your backers, do you get like some kind of mentorship? Because I guess you're a young CEO. As being a CEO of a startup is a tough job, but it's fun, but it's tough. Is that something you've looked into to get like some kind of strategy assistance or having some help in developing the strategy of the company?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there isn't like a formal mentorship, but there is for specific things. And so Jason actually specifically from Strava was really helpful when we closed our Series A last year. So I think if I look at myself as a founder, like I think I've been able to pick up a lot of things along the way. I mean, you're just learning all these new skills, like accounting, finance, strategy, product management, whatever, And so I think fundraising's always been the one that's like the least natural for me. Again, because I'm an introvert, so it's like having to pitch to people and like explain the company and all that. Like it's like I'm not the best at that. I've gotten better, but I think like I had a lot of mentorship from Jason. There's also Albert Lee, who's the co-founder of MyFitnessPal. He also is an investor in the company. So both of them were like super hands-on, very helpful throughout the whole Series A process. And then the third person was the CEO of Handshake, which is a recruiting company. So they're kind of almost like a competitor to LinkedIn, but they are for colleges specifically. And so the CEO is Garrett Lord is his name. He's also an early investor. So those three guys were really helpful when I was going through the Series A conversations. And just in general, just kind of thinking about company building and, the next hires we want to make and, how big do we want to make the team and when do we want to fundraise? Who do we want to fundraise from? Like all of that. So they've been really helpful with that. And then now after the Series A, we actually have like a board. So we actually have like our lead investor from the Series A is on the board now. And so, now they're kind of like the main mentor for us. But definitely. I think that's very important, especially as a first-time founder. You're kind of just shooting in the dark. So it's helpful to have like a little bit of guidance there. Ultimately, the execution has to come from you, but I think that, they can only help so much, but certainly helpful to have them than to not. And we've been very lucky to have some really great people on our side and just always so supportive and very helpful and willing to, give their time, which I think is rare. So it's been amazing.
Do you have a clear like vision of where you want to go? You have vision in the name, like democratizing like pro sports experience, right?
Yes.
Do you have that clear like 5, 10 or longer plan of where you want to bring the company, or you kind of like moving along, pivoting if needed as you go?
Yeah, I think it's not so well defined. I think that is the North Star though, what you said, which is bringing the pro experience to the players. And so if you look at least within like the sport of tennis, right? Like we want to get this to a point where every time you play, like Swingvision is calling the lines for you instantly, like Hawkeye Live. It's like saying out loud for you. It's even like saying the score for you. So you don't even need to know how to keep score. Maybe you're a new person playing tennis for the first time, but Swingvision is there to actually like keep score for you. And so I think like that's where we want to go. We want to make it feel like you're playing on center court every single time you play. And you have a ref, you have an umpire, you have linesmen. Like that's really the experience we're trying to bring. And there's maybe other aspects of that experience we might try to bring in the future too. But that's really kind of the core like playing experience we want to provide. And so, I think that's sort of like probably the 10-year vision is to get to that point. And it'll take some time to get there. And then, aside from tennis, we want to maybe do that with other sports as well, where it makes sense, like you said. So, pickleball is very similar. Padel is very similar. So those are ones that it makes sense for us to go to. And there might be other ones as well that also make sense, but I think that's the fundamental thing that we're trying to do. And I guess beyond just like the officiating part, imagine like you're playing and it's like streamed as well. Like that's just the default. Like every match you play is streamed. Friends and family can watch it. They can maybe cheer for you, and you're able to like hear or see like what they're saying to root you on, and it just feels like you're in a stadium, like literally. So I think like we want to try to get to that as close as we can. And it's not going to be like exactly the same thing as what the pros have, but it's, as close as we can get it with the limits of what the technology allows us to do.
That's amazing. I think also you really like are on a good spot in terms of timing, right? Because if you will watch YouTubers now, there's so many people watching YouTube matches, whether it's like Winston Dewey is doing his channel, and there are many other channels that do that as well. And people seem to like it because you're getting closer to the action, you get to know the players a little bit, maybe they have a chat beforehand, and then you have that camera angle, which is a little bit closer to the action. And like I ranted on several podcasts, like the most recent one as well, that it, like we need to have selections and options to choose the camera angle we want to see, because tennis TV, they still show the same format, and also like the normal TV show the same angle, the same tennis is produced the same way it was in the 80s, right? So I think we can offer like, hey, I want to follow Novak from behind, or I want to follow this guy from behind. So I think there's a lot of things that could be improved in terms of tennis, and just taking that frustration out of calling lines, I think is amazing as a product. If you can take that, like the potential discussion of like, was this in and out, which if you play like even on the ITF Masters Tour, which I do, which like seniors 30, 35 plus, you do get a lot of line call struggles. So I think that would be amazing as a tool, right?
Totally, yeah. I mean, I think, so your first point there, I think there's so much opportunity to just like personalize like the broadcast experience, right? Like you said, I want to see Novak from this particular angle. I always want him to be near the camera. Like they already have the cameras there, but I think it's just they're kind of controlling sort of which feed is being sent. But I think it seems like there should be a way to just put that into the viewer's control. And hopefully we'll do that too. Right now we only support one camera, but eventually we will support multiple camera angles, especially if you have the budget for that. And I hope we'll get to a point where it's going to be almost indistinguishable from a professional broadcast, and especially with like the development that you're seeing with AI and generative AI, imagine someday you could like stream your match and have like McEnroe like doing commentary for it. Like that'd be so fun. So I think you could just imagine like where this could go, right? So it's crazy. And then on the line calling side, I mean, it's so funny because initially when we were trying to build a product, we didn't really think that was something we would be able to solve with one camera. Like we kind of just thought, hey, let's just try to make some way to get stats like Hawkeye. Like that was really the initial goal. But as the AI has developed and as the technology's gotten better, the cameras have gotten better on these phones, we are now able to call the lines better than the players, which is pretty crazy. And actually, we just had our first official tournament just this past weekend with USTA down in Los Angeles. And it was a junior event, and a pretty big one. It's called the Maze Cup. So it's kind of the best players from Northern California play against the best players from Southern California. And every court, there was an iPad there where the players could go up to challenge a call. And they all did it on their own. They didn't need any officials to be there to help with them or anything. And they did have roaming officials to assist if needed, but like it was mostly self-administered, which was pretty cool to see. And they just kind of went up to the iPad. They saw the result. It said in or out, and they just kind of moved on with their day. And it was just so amazing to see that all the arguments were gone, basically. And then in addition to that, people were just making more honest calls, because they know that they can be challenged and they're on film. So that was the parents really love that part. They saw an instant behavior change. So we're not quite at ITF levels yet, but we'll work our way there. But yeah, we just started with USTA SoCal, and slowly we'll work our way through the rest of the USTA sections, and then hopefully eventually we'll get there globally too. But it's pretty exciting times. It's all coming like in the next few years.
Yeah, it's an amazing feature. I mean, like, look at the amount of cheating in college tennis, right? Like, there's so much. There's endless videos of people calling like a ball that's like half a meter in when he's just running towards it, and he's like, "Oh, it's out," and then now you can kind of cut that out, and it's almost like you're kind of raising a new generation of non-cheaters. Then, like, you're like, okay, well, like, we can challenge it now. So, like you say, that you will change the behavior hopefully over time because people can't do it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you're changing the culture, right, of tennis. And I think, as you mentioned, college tennis is probably the worst because you even have coaches who specifically will tell you that, like, if it's close, just call it out. And that's just so bad. I mean, we should not be having that. That shouldn't be like the default behavior and the default strategy. Like, so I think if we can just remove all that, then it just comes down to execution of actually playing tennis, which is what it should be. And that's what it is in the pros, right? And so I think, again, we just bring the pro experience to everybody. Hopefully college tennis will be better. It's a little sad because like today, if you go on like X, I guess, or Twitter, the most viral post for college tennis is always like a bad line call. Like that's when you see it go up, blow up in terms of virality. So hopefully it'll just become like close call challenges or something instead of that. But yeah, it's a sad state of affairs right now, but it will be solved. So
Yeah,
future's
I'm
bright.
seeing a positive future here. I actually had a thought just before jumping on, like whether you could use Swingvision as kind of like an AI coach in the future, where you could actually automatically spot flaws in player movement, shot selection, and kind of swing mechanics. So whether using one or several cameras maybe, but you could be like, hey, going to the forehand, so you get actually automatic analysis of what's going on, like similar to what they have in chess, like chess.com. They have these semi-lame, I'm a chess player from the past, right? So semi-lame coaching, but it's still much better than nothing, right? So, and that could be an interesting way of bringing AI into coaching as well.
Yeah, definitely. That is a plan. We actually just launched basically this week on the App Store a new feature where the app will actually now tell you what strategies are working well when you're playing somebody. So like when you serve down the tee, you have like 70% chance of winning the point. When you're on the deuce side returning, you should actually hit the forehand back to their forehand. That's actually the best strategy. So based on what happened in your match and like the actual points that were won and lost, we're actually now able to tell you what strategies will help you win. And then conversely, we're also able to tell you what strategies are resulting in you losing the most points. Like you lost 9 points when someone hit to your backhand and you tried to go back cross court to their backhand, and like maybe that's a shot you need to work on. So we're slowly getting into that level, like what you're saying. It's not quite technique feedback, but it's strategy feedback. And then you could imagine long term, like we'll be able to do technique feedback as well, and we could even provide that in real time. Like let's say you're just going out and doing serve practice, right, or hitting with the ball machine, and you could actually get like real time feedback in your AirPods or something. So I think that's where this will get to eventually. And definitely have seen a lot of demand for that, and I think it's exciting because I don't think it's necessarily going to replace coaches, but it would sort of augment the coaching experience. And if anything, it might even open up opportunity for more coaching, like remote coaching, and make that coaching more efficient. Or, the AI sort of helps the coach figure out what are the specific parts of the video that you need to look at and provide feedback on just those parts. So I think it's sort of like an assistive tool. But we'll see how that evolves. But we have some more stuff for that planned over the next year. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
That's great. Yeah, because using coaching, like using video for coaching is even if you can't like replace like a real life coach standing next to you hitting forehands, like watching you hit forehands, it's still so much better that you can actually go to YouTube, you can watch a video, you can record yourself, you can play it back, you can send a clip to someone even. So that's like already making, I think, the improvement process quite much faster than it was in the past. And I noticed that with like many things like music, where it's so much easier now to learn music. Like I play music on the side, and it's so much easier now to learn songs and stuff than when I started, right? Because of technology. So it helps to improve the learning, which is something we can all just be happy about.
Totally. I mean, that's what I do a lot with Swingvision. Like if I notice, my serve is a little off or something, it's like I can just go back in the app and say like, show me all the serves that I missed, and I can just watch it. And it's just like instantly within a couple minutes, what's wrong. And then if you need help, you can go to YouTube and, find great people out there putting good content on how to fix your toss or how to, hit a kick serve or whatever it is. Like anything you want is out there. And all of this is just getting compressed, like you said, and the ability to improve is getting maximized, I think. And it's great because I think especially with a sport like tennis, it's so technical and there's so many barriers to entry, and just getting to the point of like being able to play a single point is so complicated because you have to know how to serve, need to know how to return a serve and all that stuff. So it's such a big barrier compared to a sport like pickleball, I'd say, where you can just start on day one. But it's nice to see that there's so much technology, like you said, it's making it easier. Hopefully that means more people will play tennis. So it's exactly.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. So AI, like it's a huge discussion, like maybe the topic slow down a little bit, but it's still something where people talk about. How deeply are you following AI in general? Like because you're so closely connected to it as a company.
Yeah, I mean, I think we try to follow it from a distance. I would say, we don't want the latest trends to really like influence too much in the way that we're trying to build a product. I think for us, it's always number one priority is like, let's address what customers want. Let's build something that customers want. And, if AI happens to help with that, then that's great. But we don't necessarily need to have AI in every single thing that we build. for customers. Every single feature doesn't need to be AI driven. I don't think we have that philosophy at all. But it is interesting to just see like the developments that are being made and interesting new product experiences that are being created. I think it's really cool to see these new like chat style interfaces that you're seeing in a lot of apps now. And remains to be seen if like every app is going to be like that. Like, am I going to be just chatting with my word processor? Am I just going to be chatting with my Slack assistant and not with people? Like, I don't know. But I think certainly some apps are going to move in that direction, and some applications are. So we're kind of just following it from a distance, assessing whether that thing helps us solve a particular problem that we're trying to solve. And if it does, then great. But not necessarily attached to that. And yeah, so far we've been just kind of going our own path, I think. And I think the key thing for us is just we're always building our own AI. We're always collecting our own data. We're not tapping into OpenAI or anything like that, which I know a lot of startups are trying to do because it's sort of like a shortcut path. But I don't feel like that's a good approach long term, because then it just means like anybody can do it. Like you're not building anything defensible. So I think we really try to do everything in house as much as we can. But taking inspiration from what's being created in the industry is always a good idea too.
In the beginning, I mean, you had a lot of support, but also like really like good reviews and good like appreciation from Apple. Like that's been probably huge for you, I would guess. And it's been kind of first and foremost an Apple product, but now also on Android. How has that journey been like working with Apple products, and then like contrast that to getting it out on Android? Is that much more difficult? Like, is that a whole different ballpark as a company?
Yeah. I mean, Apple's been incredibly supportive. It was quite early on. Like, I think before we even made Swingvision, we actually originally made it was called Swing, which was an app for the Apple Watch, and it would just let you keep score. So there's no AI or anything like that. But it was just like a fun app to like keep score, and like you could get some basic match stats out of it. So we actually were already featured by Apple for that app because it was just so new. The watch had just come out and we were one of the first apps for it. And we actually, when we got featured that year, I think it was 2018, for the new Apple Watch that came out, I think Series 4 or something, I actually included that screenshot from Apple's website, because we were featured on Apple's website for the Series 4 as like one of the apps that's really good for the watch. I included that slide in my pitch to Andy and James, actually. So it was actually a very helpful proof point. So, I think I credit some of the investment to the support we got from Apple, actually, because that showed some validation. Like, okay, we're building this brand new thing where it's going to like track the ball using the camera, and that's completely different. But at least it showed that like, hey, these guys know how to make an app that like even Apple would recognize. And so I think that helped a lot with the credibility. And then from then on, we had already kind of built some sort of relationship with the team at Apple. And so they were aware that like we exist and we really love pushing the limits of, their devices. And so anytime we would release something completely new, they were always interested in featuring it. And that's how we've been featured in like 3 keynote events at this point. And then finally we got the Apple Design Award last year. So yeah, they've really kind of been very excited every time we're building something new. And anytime they're releasing new devices, they're kind of asking us like, hey, what do you want to build for this? And so it's a very unique relationship that we have with them. We're very fortunate to have that, and that it's still surprising to me that they even recognized us, because there's like millions of apps out there. Like, I don't know how they found us, but probably some people were using it in the company or something is my guess. But yeah, that's been so helpful. And I mean, it's helped a lot with just like acquiring more customers, because anytime you get featured on the App Store or featured in a keynote, obviously just drives more awareness and like buzz around the product. And then yeah, with developing it itself, it's been, I would say, fairly straightforward with Apple, because you can trust that like the same code is going to work well across multiple devices and multiple generations of devices. I think that's the biggest advantage that we have working on Apple. Whereas when it comes to Android, we're still not on Android yet. We're getting really close though, but it's just, Samsung does their own little flavor of Android, and then like the Google Pixel has their own thing, and then the OnePlus does their own thing. And so it's like, and even if they're using the exact same chips in the phones, like the performance will be different because the software is different. And so I think that's been kind of like the challenging part. And I mean, it just comes with the territory. Like most of the world uses Android. We have to go to Android, and we're going to have to go through that pain. But it is more challenging. Like it is objectively more challenging to develop on Android and to support more devices. but we're committed to it. We're going to get there. It's just, for us, it's really just been performance. That's like the main reason. Apple's silicon is just really, really far ahead, several years ahead, actually, of any silicon being made by anybody. But the world will catch up at some point. And the latest Android phones are looking really good. So I think we're almost there. I'm really excited to come to Android. I know it's like the number one feature request always, and it's the number one comment on social media and every video. It's like, when are you coming to Android? People accuse us of being like paid by Apple to not go to Android, and like all kinds of ridiculous conspiracy theories, which is kind of funny, but also sad. But no, we'll get there. I'm pretty sure we'll get there like in the next year. It's like we're very close. We're just right on the cusp. But
great.
Yeah, I'm also dreading the pain a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's being an Apple. Yeah, sorry. Being an Apple guy, like for me, it's hard to say. I mean, I know you're missing out on such a big audience that use other phones, but for me, it's always been like so smooth. Just like, okay, my Apple Watch, my Apple phone. People would call me a sucker, but it's like it's just like so much easier in my life if I just buy the Apple products and keep using them, because it's like one platform to work from, right? So it's pretty good. Have you been in touch with the ATP, or have the ATP or WTA been in touch with you guys, as you're one of like the kind of leading tennis startups and you're bringing something quite new to the game?
A bit. I actually randomly had a meeting with Andrea Gadenzi, is that his name? Who runs the ATP. Yep. So I met with him a couple years ago. We were trying to get him on as an angel investor actually, but he ended up passing. But he was very fascinated with what we were doing, and I think he's trying to build this whole like one vision, right, where it's like all combined and like the same technologies used across all levels of the professional tennis and everything. So I think there's probably something there. I feel like it's a little early right now, just because our technology is still very like consumer focused, and there's always trade-offs you're going to have to make. Like when you're trying to make it so affordable that it just runs on your phone, then that means that like there's limits to the kind of accuracy you could have. And obviously the professional level, they just have a much higher bar. There's so much more at stake. And so, and they already have Hawkeye, for example, being used where they have like 10 cameras on the court. And, obviously our AI is amazing and I love it, but like, 10 cameras, like it's really hard to compete with that with just one phone. But who knows? We'll see over time. I think, as I mentioned, we are planning to build a multi-camera system at some point. I don't think we're going to need 10 cameras, but we will need more than one if we do want to go into the pro level. And I think what's exciting is there is an opportunity at, like, for example, the challenger level, right? Like Hawkeye is not used at any challenger events basically because it's too expensive. And so there's like nothing there. And it's still like linesmen, and it's pretty bad. Like there's some events where you'll have like one linesman on the sideline and he's calling the ball on the other side of the net, like the entire sideline he's calling, which is just insane. Like that should not be happening. But I get it. Like the budget is what it is. It's not like broadcast on TV. They don't have the same sponsor levels. But I think that's a really exciting opportunity for us because, with let's say two iPhones, I think we could do a much better job than the linesman, and you'd have equal accuracy on both sides and all that stuff. So I think there's a very exciting opportunity there in sort of that like middle level, just outside of like the slams and the masters. And it's actually very wide. If you think about it, there's more tournaments at that level than there are at the higher level. So there's more players that you can help and all that. So I think that's really exciting. And, as we start creeping up the levels of the sport, maybe there's some formal partnership or something that happens with ATP and WTA. I think we're still a few years away from that. But it would be pretty cool to have the same technology being used at the pros and at the amateur level. Like, I think that would be pretty nice.
Yeah, it would fit in well with the vision for sure, and also with, like you say, the ATP vision. And I think like they want to push like futures, challengers, the lower levels. I mean, this is still insanely high level of tennis. But the issue is like often when you watch, either you go to a futures tournament or even if I play some seniors events and stuff, it's that line calling. If you can take that out of the equation, you save a lot of pain for players and the whole tournament and potentially costs as well. Like you say, like it's expensive to have linesmen umpire for every match. And if you can have a good digital system that is not expensive, it saves the headache for everyone, right? Like it saves money and it also saves the headache between the players because you can argue with the ref, you can argue with your opponent, but it's hard to argue with data and a computer. So I think that would be so much better for everyone, really, if you can get to that point.
Yeah, for sure. I think we could help so much there with officiating, and then I think the same thing applies to like broadcast too, right? Like at the slams and the masters, you have this amazing like broadcast setup. Although, as you mentioned, there's room for improvement, but it is really nice, right? And like you can put it on ESPN and all that. But at the challenger level, you just don't have that same budget to have multiple cameramen and multiple cameras and a whole production crew and all that, right? So I think there's something we could do to help with that too. If you just put up two iPhones and maybe throw in some generative AI magic, you could create a broadcast feel to a challenger event, and then suddenly you include that in the tennis TV subscription or whatever streaming service you use, Amazon Prime, whatever it is. I just think it would open up more visibility into those matches. And like you said, a lot of people don't know that those matches are very high level. Like it's very fun to watch that level of tennis. It's basically imperceptibly different, from like a slam match. Like it's so good, the tennis. And so there's just huge opportunity there. And I think the same would apply to college too. Like we should be having every college match broadcasted. I mean, this is an insanely high level of tennis. It's a very unique format because it's like a team format. So it's literally like Laver Cup, every match is like a Laver Cup event, essentially. It's a team event. So I just think there's so much more visibility that could happen there. And then, same thing applies to Davis Cup and all that. But I think so much opportunity to have better content being created. I mean, I've seen some of these challenger matches that they do stream, and like the video quality is not great. It looks like it's from the 80s or something. Like, I don't know what camera they're using, but it's like, it's like, come on, my iPhone is better than this. Like, I watched my own match on Swingvision and it looks better. It's just like, clearly there's a disconnect here. So it feels like there's an opportunity. Hopefully it'll happen.
Yeah, because I think what they should notice now, like they do some live streaming of Challenger. I saw like Berrettini when he was coming back from injury. I saw him playing like, oh, I want to see Berrettini. How is he doing, right? Like, because you also suffer when players suffer in a way that you like they have been struggling with injuries, always this injury, lingering. And when he was back, I watched a bit of YouTube. I'm like, this is a great venue to push tennis. You live stream a sanctioned event on a high level with some star. Like Team was also playing challengers, a lot of players playing challengers. Yeah. Live stream that for free. You get so many tennis fans. And like also for tennis TV, you can then cross-sell to be a tennis TV member. Oh, you like this stuff? On tennis TV, you can replay matches from Agassi up to watching Novak win ATP Masters. So tennis has some kind of marketing packaging, to do some improvements of, in my opinion, I think, because the tennis product itself is strong.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like that's so much of what's holding back like the fan base probably, and just general revenue coming into the sport, is just the way that it's marketed, the way it's presented. It hasn't changed all that much really, like you said. They should be moving to a lot more court level view. You just see like the physicality so much better from that angle, and you can appreciate it more even if you're not a tennis player. So yeah, there's so much opportunity, but I'm optimistic that the industry will kind of move forward in that direction, and will make the broadcast experience even better across all levels. I think it'll just be so great for the sport. Very exciting.
Yeah, for sure. When you log into Swingvision, one of the things I really like is that you get a feed like with players from all over the world, all levels, posting their matches. I'm not sure if they know that people can watch it if they want, but it feels like such a tennis loving community, and points of all levels, because like I do racket consultations and stuff. Like, so for me, sometimes people send me Swingvision footage. They send me links to Swingvision. It's quite often. And then I can look at, okay, so I'm using this racket. It doesn't work for me. This is my level. Because people sometimes have a hard time estimating their own level or their weaknesses. So people don't know, like, am I a 4.0? Am I a 5.0? Most people overestimate how good they are, I would say, in tennis. Myself probably included. And that is great then to get that footage. But then when you're on the app, you feel like it's such a community. What would you say is like the feedback and the kind of the most popular feature that people use, or do they get back to you? They're so happy that they can upload their stuff, and you cut out the in-between time, which is a huge feature saver of yours. So what's kind of the response from the swing community?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think with the feed, it's very fun to look at. Like, I think when you first kind of poke around in the app, I think for a lot of people, they tend to use Swingvision in sort of like single player mode. So they're mainly just focused on like their matches. But we have gotten more and more requests to kind of make that feed a bit more curated and like show your friends, or be able to search by a specific level. Like, I'm a 3-5. I'm trying to get to a 4-0. Like, show me just 4-0 singles matches. And like, I want to just poke around and see like, how do people serve at the 4-0 level? How are they moving? Like, what's their forehand speed looking like? Like, I think that's a huge opportunity for us to improve that feature and just make it more useful and more curated to what you're trying to get out of it. But certainly the most popular feature is what you mentioned, which is removing time. I think, if you're saving people time, it's like hard to beat that, right? So I think the fact that you can watch your entire like 2-hour match in like less than like 30 minutes is pretty incredible. And you can just watch right through it really quickly. It just cuts the time out. And now with auto scoring, it'll put a scoreboard on your video. So I don't know if you've used this yet, but basically like at the end of the match, you just put the final set scores. Like let's say it was 6-3, 6-4. So you just confirm that, and then it will generate a point-by-point scoreboard throughout the entire video. And so now if you go watch the video, you'll have a little scoreboard in the corner. You can now say things like, show me every break point, show me every 30-all point, and you can immediately see that. So that's, again, just in that same spirit of like saving you time. And, you don't have to like keep score on your Apple Watch anymore. It'll just automatically like fill that in for you. So I think those things have been definitely the most popular, and just like the video in general. And then surprisingly, the stats are like not that popular. Like only if you're really advanced will you really kind of go through all the stats and all that. But it's kind of overwhelming, and maybe that's something that we could be doing better in terms of presenting that information in a more digestible format. But I think people tend to just enjoy the video more. And then if you're more of like a social player, you don't really care about the stats at all, other than maybe like the speed, because that's like an ego thing. But I think, for them, it's just like highlights, and it's like, hey, I favorited a few points on my watch, and like, I'm just going to share this with my friends on WhatsApp afterwards, and we can watch those highlights together, maybe watch it on the big screen at home when we're on the TV screen. So it's been cool to see, but it's just, everything has just been around the video. I think whether it's like fun points or just for strategy purposes or looking at my technique, that's really what people have been enjoying the most.
Yeah, stats are tough. Like I'm out stats. I like stats, but then you need to put in time to actually extract something out of stats. That's the thing, and I think people generally are lazy, as we all are comfortable. And I think a lot of people just want like, here are 3 takeaways. You hit too many double faults. This was your backhand was weak on these points or whatever, and then like three sentences, and that's like, because if you talk to analytics experts in tennis that kind of serve the top players in the world, who pay for analysis, for them to kind of sit there and crunch Excel numbers, like, and these are 3 key points. I think the main feeling I have is that the player just wants these, like, okay, I should attack her second serve. Like this is like some 3 easy steps, because it's too much to keep in your head, maybe. So maybe for coaches it's a little different, but that would be
definitely
cool.
And I think that's where that new AI coaching feature I was mentioning, it kind of does boil it down to that. It's like you're just going to get like 3 or 4 things out of every match, and hopefully, it'll be interesting to see like what the response is to that new feature. But I think if that does well, we'll try to do more of that and just basically keep it simple, right? So I think that's the best way to go.
How much tennis are you playing in Swingvision? Do you have to be a tennis player or pickleball player to work for Swingvision, or do you have like company tournaments or something like that?
Oh man, you're like reading my mind. So it's not a requirement to join, but it is a very high signal for us. Like I think almost everybody is an avid tennis or pickleball player. There's a couple of exceptions, but we've kind of converted those people into becoming more avid. It's a very, very tennis centric company for sure. We have offices in the San Francisco Bay Area. So we have like an office in Berkeley, where I went to school. And then we also have an office in the peninsula about 30 minutes south of San Francisco. And every week we have multiple times per week that we'll go play tennis after work. And I actually just moved down to LA, but I still go back up to San Francisco every week just because I want to spend time with the team. I personally prefer like working in person. So I just love being with the team, and I'll join them for tennis after work. And it's been so fun. I've been on a streak lately. I've been playing a lot of singles, and I've been taking some scalps. I've beaten a few interns on the team. So I need to get humbled soon. I'm sure it's coming soon. But no, it's been fun. I've been playing a lot, at least like 3 times a week. And it's just a great way for us to test out features, test out new things, and just keeps everybody kind of familiar with the user experience and be able to sympathize with customers and all that. So I think it's just important for everybody on the team to play, and we try to really like push everyone to make sure you go out and play. I know work is busy and life is busy, but try to play, and it's good for your health too, right? So no, but it's been fun getting a lot of tennis in. Haven't played pickle in a while, actually. I was on a pretty good run earlier in the year, but I need to get back into it in the summer. But for now, it's like a lot of tennis for sure.
So you're quite an avid player. That's great. Do you follow the tour or like any kind of matches, competitive? Like, do you have a time for that at all? Or
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely much hard to do now. I remember when I was in college, like I would watch like every single tournament, at least every Masters for sure, and like the second week I'd be watching, and then the slams as well. Like second week I was watching like all the major matches and everything. So yeah, now it's kind of like I still follow everything mostly on like Twitter. But then I will try to watch like finals of matches, especially if it's like two big players. So actually, like at my house, I hosted the Australian Open finals, and so we were up all night. I had several friends over. We saw the Sinner Medvedev match, which was incredible.
yeah, it was great.
Comeback from Yannick. So most of us were really big Sinner fans, so we were really excited that he won. And then what was it? Oh, the Indian Wells. Well, I went to Indian Wells and I saw some matches, and then of course I had to see the Alcaraz Sinner match. So that was so great. No, yeah, it's been fun. I definitely try to keep on top of things. I've been listening to Andy's podcast a lot too, so he helps give me a bit of the rundown. I got to listen to his podcast, so. Yeah, it's sad to see all the injuries happening though lately, especially like in Madrid. That was really unfortunate, but hopefully the guys can recover. But it just feels like they're playing too much tennis. I don't know. The schedule's like so intense. But hopefully somebody fixes that because we really want these players to be able to be like maximum health at every event, but I'm really excited for like Wimbledon and like what's going to happen there, because I feel like that's, at least on the men's side, like that's like Yannick's best surface, but Alcaraz won last year. So yeah, there's just so many cool storylines happening both on the men's and women's side. So I feel like it's a good time to be a tennis fan. Almost too much to keep up with.
I was worried. Like I'm a Fed fan. I'm a Rafa Fed fan, of course, both guys. But yeah, because that's kind of when I got back into tennis. But I was worried. Like, okay, after these guys retire, the growths, tennis would be in a vacuum, which happened a little bit. Like maybe after Sampras or whatever, there was a bit of a vacuum, I think. Federer came then, like after maybe a year or two. But now we're not worried anymore. It's only the injuries, as you say. Like, do you have any favorite players that you follow a bit extra? Or you're kind of like general fan?
I mean, I think single favorite player for me right now is Carlos. I saw him against Andy Murray at Indian Wells back in like 2018, so he was still like a baby basically, and it was a long 3-setter. I think Andy actually won that match, but you could just see already from that age like just the talent that he has, and I really enjoy watching players with variety, which is why I'm a huge Federer fan. I mean, I like seeing players who will come to net, serve and volley, they'll do a drop shot. They'll do that half volley, but they can also play from the baseline. Like for me, that's tennis at its peak, is when you have that variety, and just like the geometry of the points that you see, especially when Yannick plays against Carlos, is like just peak tennis. I feel like it reminds me of like the Fadal rallies where you'd have these crazy, looping forehand, then like he hits like a cross-court forehand, then he hits like a backhand slice that's like a squash shot, and then it's just like this crazy like mix of geometry and spins. For me, that's like the best thing. So I really love watching those two play. I'm always rooting for Carlos, but I love Yannick too. It reminds me of like the Federer Nadal, where it's like you're kind of rooting for both, but you do have like one person who's like your slight favorite. So I think like I'm really enjoying that. And then on the women's side, like I'm a huge Coco fan. I just think it's so great. Again, there too, we thought there'd be a huge vacuum after Serena left, especially as an American. Like it's so great to see Coco. I'm like always rooting for her. And she's just such a great like personality on and off court. And then I love watching Ika play too. I mean, she's just so great. And then it's great. Now we have like Arena as well, kind of playing really well. So all these really great players, it's so fun. And seeing so many like epic matches and finals, it's like I'm always rooting for like the long matches. So yeah, kind of wish women's was best of 5, honestly, because like it'd be so cool to watch. But I know it's brutal. We'd have even more injuries. But I'm always like dying to see more tennis and like see longer matches. All these epic ones are so great.
Yeah, the storyline of a 5-setter can't be beat, in my opinion. Like, I like a tennis story, right? So, variety, I 100% agree. I'm also a Carlitos fan, and also approve of Sinner, of course. But it's like that storyline when it's ebb and flow in a match. That's what you want to see. Like, there's some... You don't want to see a complete destruction of someone. You want to see that this goes... And then you have no idea for the 5th. That's like the best entertainment. And then, of course, a 3-setter can be dramatic, but I don't think anything beats 5 sets, right? That's really where it is. Although... Like you say, the injury is something, I don't know, like less tennis, better scheduling, fewer tournaments, fewer mandatory tournaments. That's up to the ATP WTA, but it's worrying when you can't. Like, I'm going to Rome next week, right, on Tuesday to watch some tennis. It's a bit of a work trip, and you want to see XYZ player, and then it's like injury, and then you're like, okay, well, at least I get to see some tennis, and I just hope Rafa is still there or something. That would be good. We'll see.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, the French is gonna be so fun. I mean, we'll see how far Rafa can go, but yeah, I mean, just seeing him one last time is gonna be amazing.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, it's nice to hear you're such a tennis fan, and I love the app, as you know, and I will keep using it. And if I have feedback, I will send it over. It's been a great journey. I think it's like really connected well to, I think, the growth of tennis as kind of in tennis media or social media or using video, and I think it's like slots in perfectly there. Also for players who are ambitious and want to see themselves play or record themselves all the time, which I've been doing. It's really helped to have an app that you can do it. You can cut out points and you can keep score and stuff like that. So we're really well done. And I wish you really an amazing journey. And I hope to be a part in some way, and we keep in touch after that.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you for having me. I've been a huge fan of the podcast for a long time, and just all your YouTube content is like legendary. So you're a legend, I think, in our sport. So thanks for everything that you do. And it's just like an honor to be on this. So thanks for having me.